I've driven this route many times after a long week away on the road, but that particular night is burnt into my memory. The woods around me were familiar, the kind of dark, dense trees that make you feel small even in a big truck. I wasn't really thinking about anything, just getting home to my family. I've never stopped thinking about what happened. As I drove, I noticed the fog rolling in. It made the headlights cut through the darkness in thick beams. I felt a chill, but thought it was just the cold creeping in. I kept my eyes on the road. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. I slowed down, thinking it was maybe a hiker in trouble. I leaned forward in my seat. I thought I could help. But as I got closer, the figure just faded away, like a mirage. 1 second it was there, and then it wasn't. My heart raced. I thought maybe I was just tired. The next night, I drove the same route again. I was more alert this time. I kept telling myself I had just imagined it all. But then, out of nowhere, I saw glowing eyes staring at me from the side of the road. I thought it was an animal, maybe a deer, but it didn't move. I felt a cold sweat on my back. I could see it blinking, but I never caught sight of its body. Something was waiting for me. I was scared. I felt a knot in my stomach and just kept driving. The third night was the worst. I was exhausted and just wanted to make it home. I was halfway through the woods when I heard whispers. Not loud, but enough that I could pick out a few words. They seemed almost like they were calling my name. I turned down the radio and focused, but I couldn't make sense of any of it. It was like I was in an old ghost story. My thoughts raced. I wondered if I was losing my mind. I could swear I felt a presence in the cabin with me, heavy and unsettling, like someone or something was right behind me. Then came the moment that still haunts me. I pulled over, needing a break. I opened the door to get some fresh air and check my truck. That's when I heard it. A voice. Jake. It was soft, almost a whisper. I turned around quickly, but there was nobody there. A bad feeling crawled up my spine. I slammed the door and drove away, shaken. I still drive those woods at night, even though I'm not sure what I saw. Maybe it was just my imagination, or maybe something really was out there. I'm not sure. But every time I pass through, I wonder what I'll encounter next. I can't shake the feeling that the woods are watching me, waiting for another chance to reveal their secrets. I can't explain it.
And I don't know if I want to. The night after my last experience in the woods, I decided to take a different route home. I thought maybe I could shake off whatever was haunting me. But as I drove, I felt the same tightness in my chest. The woods weren't far, and I wondered if I'd made the right choice. About 20 minutes in, my phone buzzed. My wife was calling. Her voice was warm, a safe haven away from the shadows I had just left behind. I told her about my drive and the strange things I had seen, but she laughed it off. "You're just tired, Jake. You've been on the road too long." Her laughter made me feel better, but it wasn't enough to fully dispel the chill that lingered over me. I hung up feeling a bit lighter, but it didn't last. Just as I turned onto the road that led to our house, an uneasy feeling washed over me again. It was as if the trees were leaning closer, listening in on my thoughts. I pulled into the driveway and parked. The night was just as quiet as it had been before, but it felt different. The silence was thick, like a blanket you couldn't escape. I got out and headed toward the front door when I noticed something strange on the ground. It was a small, shiny object. I bent down to pick it up. It was a pendant, a silver locket. I opened it, expecting to find a picture or something personal. Instead, it was empty. I stared at it for a moment, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Who had lost this here? I looked around, thinking someone might still be nearby. Suddenly, I heard it again, the whisper. Jake. I froze, hard in my throat. It was so quiet, and yet I felt surrounded. "Get inside," I muttered under my breath, turning to grab the door handle. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something was waiting out there in the dark. Once inside, I locked the door and leaned against it, the locket heavy in my palm. I contemplated throwing it away, but deep down, I wondered what it meant. I decided to look it up online instead. I flipped open my laptop, my fingers trembling as I searched for similar pendants. The faint glow of the screen was a small comfort. Then I found something. A post about missing people in this area, a strange collection of stories connected to the woods. Some had vanished without a trace. I felt the blood drain from my face. The more I read, the more it made sense. The whispers, the eyes, the feeling of being followed. It was all tied to something deeper than my imagination. I needed to know more. I thought about going back to the woods, but fear gripped me. It was no longer just a curiosity. I felt a weight pressing down on me.
An urgency to find answers and maybe, just maybe, warn others. As I sat there in that dim light, the locket still in my hand, a new thought crossed my mind. What if there was more hidden out there, waiting for me to uncover it? I glanced out the window at the woods in the distance. I could feel them calling again. The next day, I couldn't shake off the unsettling feeling that clung to me. I spent the morning going over the stories I'd found about the missing people. I jotted down names and dates, piecing together the connections I could find. Every thread I pulled led me back to the woods, and every story seemed to tug at something inside me. By noon, an idea struck me. I needed to talk to someone who might know what was going on. I decided to visit the old gas station a few miles from my house. The owner, a grizzled man named Frank, had lived here forever. He knew the history of the area better than anyone. If anyone had answers, it would be him. As I drove, the familiar road twisted and turned. It felt heavier, as if the trees were closing in around me. I caught a glimpse of movement in the periphery and quickly turned my head, only to find nothing but leaves fluttering. "Get a grip, Jake," I muttered. When I arrived at Frank's station, I found him outside, repairing an old pump. He looked up as I approached, wiping his hands on a rag. "What brings you here, Jake?" he asked. I took a deep breath and launched into my questions. Frank stood there, listening as I described the locket, the whispers, the stories I had read. I watched his expression change, brows furrowing in concern. "Those woods have always had their secrets," he said slowly. "People who wander in sometimes don't come back. It's like they get taken." Taken? The word sent a jolt through me. Taken? By what? I asked, the uneasy feeling returning. "Maybe it's best not to poke around too much," he warned, glancing toward the tree line. "Some things are better left alone." I felt a rush of frustration. But I have to know, what happened to those people? Frank hesitated and then pulled a small notebook from his pocket. He flipped through it, stopping at a page and pointing. "There's been talk about a shadow in the woods. No one knows what it is, but it moves fast, and it doesn't want to be seen. Stick to the road, Jake. Trust me." I tried to hide my growing fear, but I felt it wrap around me like a tight band. "And the pendant I found? Does it mean anything?" Frank didn't answer right away. Instead, he searched my eyes, as if trying to gauge how much I understood. "It's not just a piece of jewelry. Some believe it belongs to those who've been taken. It's a warning." I stepped back, disbelief flashing through me. "You're saying it was meant for me?" "It's a sign, Jake. No good comes from it." Before I could respond, I felt a chill sweep through the air. Something about Frank's demeanor shifted. He turned his gaze toward the woods, and I instinctively followed his line of sight. A shiver ran down my spine. A shadow flitted between the trees, too quick to be human, too dark to be an animal. "Did you see that?" I whispered. Frank nodded, his face pale. "Get in your car, now."
I didn't hesitate. I ran back to my car, heart pounding. I fumbled with the keys as I glanced back at the woods. They felt alive, and they were watching. I finally got the engine running and peeled out of the parking lot, adrenaline coursing through me. That night, I lay awake, questions swirling in my mind. What was lurking in those woods, and why did it feel like it was coming for me? Suddenly, the pendant fell from my bedside table, landing on the floor with a soft thud. I reached over to pick it up, but I froze. It felt hot against my palm. Then I heard the whisper again. Jake. And that was when I understood. It wasn't just a name it was calling. It was a warning. The next day, I couldn't shake off the feeling of dread that seemed to fill my chest. I needed to figure this out. The whispers still echoed in my mind like an unsettling song I couldn't shake off. I decided to gather more information. Back, disbelief flashing through me. You're saying it was meant for me? It's a sign, Jake. No good comes from it. Before I could respond, I felt a chill sweep through the air. Something about Frank's demeanor shifted. He turned his gaze toward the woods, and I instinctively followed his line of sight. A shiver ran down my spine. A shadow flitted between the trees, too quick to be human, too dark to be an animal. Did you see that? I whispered. Frank nodded, his face pale. Get in your car, now. I didn't hesitate. I ran back to my car, heart pounding. I fumbled with the keys as I glanced back at the woods. They felt alive, and they were watching. I finally got the engine running and peeled out of the parking lot, adrenaline coursing through me. That night, I lay awake, questions swirling in my mind. What was lurking in those woods, and why did it feel like it was coming for me? Suddenly, the pendant fell from my bedside table, landing on the floor with a soft thud. I reached over to pick it up, but I froze. It felt hot against my palm. Then I heard the whisper again. Jake. And that was when I understood. It wasn't just a name it was calling. It was a warning. The next day, I couldn't shake off the feeling of dread that seemed to fill my chest. I needed to figure this out. The whispers still echoed in my mind, like an unsettling song I couldn't shake off. I decided to gather more information about those who had gone missing. If there were patterns, maybe I could find a way to keep myself safe. I drove back to the gas station, but this time I wasn't looking for Frank. I wanted to talk to the locals, people who had lived in this area forever. They might know about the missing people, or the shadows that hid in the woods. I stopped at the diner not far from the gas station. The bell chimed as I walked in, the smell of coffee and grease wrapping around me like a warm blanket. A few heads turned, but I spotted an elderly woman in a corner booth. She looked like someone who might have stories to tell. Mind if I join you? I asked. Help yourself, she replied, eyeing me with curiosity. I introduced myself and shared what I knew about the pendant and the disappearances. Her expression changed, turning grave. You shouldn't be looking into that, she warned. Those woods aren't safe at night, or during the day, really. Why? What do you mean? I leaned in, desperate for answers. There are stories, you know, she said, her voice low. There's a reason people don't go in there. We tell the children tales to keep them away. It's not just a shadow. They say there are things in those woods that call to you, that can pull you in. Felt a chill creep up my spine. Things? What kind of things? I only know what my grandmother told me, she said, holding her coffee cup tightly. There was a boy once. He found a pendant. He was drawn into the woods, and he never returned. The pendant? It was his before. Now it's like a beacon. Her words wrapped around me. How many more kids wore the pendant before me? It felt like a curse. I found it, I said, trying to steady my voice. What if it wants me too? She leaned closer, her eyes wide. If you start hearing whispers, if you feel it calling you, run. I left the diner haunted by her words. I climbed into my car, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. How could I just run? The curiosity pulled at me just as much as the fear. As I drove past the tree line, I noticed the woods looked different, darker. I could swear the trees were leaning in closer, almost beckoning me to come. Just then, a quick movement caught my eye. I turned my head sharply, but whatever it was vanished behind the trunks. Then I heard it, a whisper, faint but clear. Jake. My palms gripped the steering wheel. I stepped on the gas, desperate to get away from the encroaching darkness. But as I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was following me, that I was being watched. By the time I got home, I was a mess of adrenaline and fear. I bolted inside, shutting the door behind me. I needed to get away from this, leave, forget. That's when I saw it on my kitchen counter, the pendant. It glowed, almost pulsating with a strange energy. I felt a pull in my chest, an irresistible urge to reach for it. I took a step forward, but then it hit me. I took a step back, feeling a wave of urgency wash over me. Someone else was in my house. I wasn't alone anymore. I froze for a moment, my heart racing. The air felt thick, like the shadows in the corners of my home had come alive. I forced myself to take a deep breath, trying to calm the panic rising in my throat. If someone was really in my house, who were they? What did they want? "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. No answer, just silence. I cautiously moved toward the living room, keeping my eyes peeled for any sign of movement. The pendant on the counter glimmered, catching the light just right, and I fought the urge to turn back to it. I needed to focus. I listened hard. The only sounds came from the house settling, a creak here, a groan there. I glanced back at the front door, which was still shut tight, but the feeling wouldn't leave me. It was there, lurking, hiding in the corners of my mind. Then I heard it again, a soft sound like... My chest tightened. "Who's there?" I asked again, but my voice barely came out above a whisper. I crept down the hallway, my mind racing through all the worst-case scenarios. Maybe it was just my imagination, playing tricks on me after everything I'd experienced. But the lingering dread from the diner and those stories refused to let me think rationally. As I reached the end of the hall, I noticed the bathroom door was slightly ajar. Light spilled out, illuminating the floor. My breath quickened, and I hesitated. Whoever, whatever, was in my house could be waiting right inside. But the whisper came again, softer this time, almost pleading. "Jake." I steeled myself and pushed the door open. It creaked loudly, and I immediately regretted being so bold. I peered inside, but the bathroom was empty. Nothing was out of place, and yet I felt a chill wrap around me like a fog. Just as I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of movement in the mirror above the sink. My heart dropped. There, behind me, was the outline of a figure. I whipped around, but the room was still empty. I slammed the door shut and stumbled back, trying to catch my breath. What is happening? I thought. My mind spun with confusion and fear. That's when I noticed something strange on the floor. A small, dirt-encrusted object lay at my feet, half hidden in the shadows. I bent down to pick it up, and my stomach dropped. It was another pendant, almost identical to the one I had on the counter, but this one was dull and dark, like it had absorbed the light around it. A sudden rush of understanding hit me. This wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a warning. My heart raced as I pieced it together. The whispers, the feeling of being watched, it all connected. I stood up, clutching the new pendant tightly. I had to get out of here. I turned to run, but before I reached the hallway, the shadows thickened, swirling around me. Everything went dark, and the whispers grew louder, beckoning me. Jake. One thought raced through my mind. What if I was next? I stumbled backward, struck by a wave of darkness that felt almost tangible. The shadows clung to me, and I fought against the rising panic. Dim light flickered back into existence, and I found myself outside the bathroom, breathless. Somehow, I was still in my house, but everything felt different. The air was charged, alive with energy, and all those whispers had taken on a sinister quality. I turned on the hallway lights, expecting reassurance, but what I saw instead made my skin crawl. The walls seemed to shift, decorated now with faint, shadowy figures. They twisted and turned, as if trying to escape the confines of the rooms. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone, determined to gain some sort of control. As I glanced at the screen,
An incoming call from an unknown number flashed before me. My heartbeat quickened again. It wasn't the first time this had happened. I answered, despite my gut screaming no. "Hello?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. There was nothing but silence on the line for what felt like an eternity. Then, the same whisper floated through the speaker. "Jake." My heart dropped. I hung up, feeling a jolt of dread. Were they watching me? My eyes darted to the walls, still shifting as though they breathed. I needed to escape this place, to feel safe again. I rushed to the front door, but it wouldn't budge. I pressed against it, panic rising in my chest. "Open up! Let me out!" I yelled, but the door remained unyielding. The shadows grew heavier around me, and I felt suffocated by the darkness. It was then that I heard something else. Footsteps. A steady, deliberate sound coming from the living room. My heart thundered in my ears. Who was in my house? I had to find out. Against my better judgment, I crept forward. The light flickered, casting moving shadows that seemed like eyes watching me. Each step felt heavier, each moment more terrifying. As I rounded the corner into the living room, I stopped dead in my tracks. The pendant from the counter lay on the floor, glowing weakly, and right beside it stood a figure I recognized, a tall silhouette with familiar features. It was my younger brother, Tom, who had disappeared years ago without a trace. "Tom?" I whispered, my voice cracking. There were thousands of questions vying for my attention, but the chill that crept down my spine said this wasn't possible. He looked at me, eyes hollow, voice as faint as the whispers that had haunted me. "Jake, you have to listen." Before he could finish, the shadows rushed in, and everything went dark again. "Jake," the whispers returned, sharper and more insistent. I braced myself, torn between fear and a need to understand. I had to confront whatever was happening. I needed answers. But with every dark moment pulling me in, I thought, what if this was only the beginning? I didn't know how long I was lost in that darkness. When the shadows finally receded, I found myself once more in the living room. The overhead light pulsed with a sickly glow, bathing everything in an unsettling light. Tom was gone, and for a brief moment, I felt a hollow sense of loss. Had he even been there? My breath came in short bursts. I was overwhelmed. I staggered back to the hallway, my heart racing. The walls seemed to shout to me with their shadowy figures, but I couldn't decipher their meaning. I needed to be outside, away from these suffocating walls. "Please let me out," I cried, pressing my palms against the door, hoping with all my might it would open. Then I heard it again, a tap, tap, tapping, echoing through the house. From the back door. My heart dropped. The sound was too rhythmic, too deliberate to be random. Against my better judgment, I moved towards it. Each step felt like it might be my last. I reached for the handle, hesitating. What if it was something sinister? What if it was another trick of the shadows? They'd already taken Tom from me in some twisted way. Gathering all my courage, I pulled the door open, a cold gust of wind rushing in. The night was black, save for the sliver of moonlight pouring through the trees outside. Nothing. Just silence. I stood at the threshold, shivering in the cool night air. My instinct told me to shut the door and lock it tight, but something compelled me to look. That's when I noticed it, a small figure peeking from behind a tree in my backyard. My stomach twisted. "Hello?" I called out, my voice wavering. "Is someone there?" For a moment, there was just silence. Then, slowly, the figure stepped forward, revealing a child. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, her hair wild and tangled, as if she'd been running. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. I took a step, instinctively wanting to help, but as I approached, I felt the air change around me, thickening like molasses. Something wasn't right. The girl's eyes were wide and empty, and I could see the shadows moving in the depths of her gaze. There was a familiarity about her, a haunting reminder of my brother. Could it be another trick? "You have to help me, Jake," she murmured, and the sound sent a chill racing down my spine. "They're coming for you." "That's impossible. Who are you?" I demanded, panic clawing at my throat. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from inside the house, followed by the sound of footsteps, heavy and brutish. I turned back toward the living room, heart in my throat. I had to decide. Should I run into the house where I felt the shadows closing in, or stay with the girl who seemed drawn from a nightmare? As doubt washed over me, she reached out her tiny hand. "Please, trust me." But just then, the shadows lunged from the house, pouring out like a beast unleashed, and in an instant, everything went dark again. When the darkness lifted once more, I found myself on the ground, the edge of the porch pressing into my back. My head spun, and the cold air bit at my skin. I scrambled to my feet, confusion mixing with fear as I searched for the girl. But she was gone, evaporated into the night, leaving only the rustling leaves in her place. "Where are you?" I shouted, but my voice felt empty against the vastness of the yard. The shadows that had fled receded now beyond the house, almost as if they recognized that I was no longer a threat. But the fleeting sense of safety felt false. Something was still watching. Then I spotted them, dark shapes creeping along the edges of the trees, outlines that seemed to flicker with movement. My instincts screamed at me to run, to escape. I stepped quickly back into the house, slamming the door behind me. The sound echoed through the stillness, and for a second I felt secure, locked away from the horrors outside. But the moment of reprieve faded fast. The shadows inside the house lurked, swirling in the corners. I needed a way out, but the hallway stretched before me like an endless corridor, and the room felt claustrophobic. My breaths became shallow. I turned towards the kitchen, thinking maybe I could find a weapon, a knife, something, anything to defend myself with if those shadows decided to come for me. As I stumbled into the kitchen, I heard it again. The tapping, but this time it was louder, more frantic. I swallowed hard. It wasn't coming from the door. It was coming from the window. My heart raced as I approached the glass, the moonlight casting pale reflections. I peered through the curtain and froze. There, looking back at me, was the girl. But now she was different. Her face was gaunt, skin pulled tight over her bones. "Let me in!" she screamed, her voice warped with desperation. I stepped back, heart pounding. This wasn't the same child. I felt it in my gut. "Stay away!" I shouted, confusion clawing at my mind. "What do you want?" "Please, Jake," she cried, her little hands pressed against the glass. "They're coming! Let me in!" Suddenly, the window rattled violently, the glass vibrating as if something powerful was outside. The shadows in the room twisted aggressively, stretching toward me like grasping hands. I backed away, terror gripping my throat. I couldn't face what was outside, but I couldn't ignore the girl either.
Please, trust me, I can help." Her eyes held a depth of fear that felt real. And there it was again, familiarity. I shook my head, fighting against the panic rising inside. "How do I know you're not just another trick?" The shadows quickened, clawing at the edges of my vision. I needed to decide, and fast. That's when I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, creeping up the stairs from the basement. Someone, or something, was in the house with me. I stood frozen, my heart racing as the footsteps grew louder, echoing in the silence of the house. The sound was slow, deliberate, like someone taking their sweet time to make their way up those creaking stairs. Panic twisted in my stomach. I felt trapped, cornered between the girl outside and the unknown threat within. "Jake!" The girl's voice trembled through the glass, her expression now twisted with urgency. "You have to let me in! They want you! You don't understand!" "Who wants me?" I shouted back, desperately wanting answers, but wanting to stay safe even more. "What's happening?" Her gaze darted over my shoulder, and I could see fear transform her face. It felt wrong, disjointed, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that this was all a trap. Then another creak sounded from the basement steps, closer this time. I turned away from the window. I needed a place to hide. I needed a weapon. Glancing back at the girl for just a moment, I saw her press harder against the glass. "Let me in! I can protect you!" she pleaded, but her words felt hollow, too frantic to trust. With no other option, I dashed out of the kitchen and into the living room. My mind raced. The basement was right there behind the closed door, but I had to think clearly. The girl was still screaming outside, begging for my help, but whatever was behind me was inching closer, and I could almost feel its breath. I chanced a quick look around the room and spotted an old baseball bat leaning against the wall. I grabbed it, gripping it tightly in my hand as I made my way toward the basement door. The footsteps had stopped for a moment, leaving an eerie stillness. I could hear the girl faintly sobbing through the closed window. Then the basement door creaked open. I froze, bat raised, ready to swing. A dark figure stepped into the light, silhouetted against the dim glow of the hallway. It was tall and hunched, its features obscured in shadows. I couldn't make out its face, but I felt the overwhelming urge to run. "Jake." The voice was deep, guttural. "You shouldn't have come back." I felt the air grow colder as the figure stepped forward, revealing more of itself. It wasn't human. The glow from the living room cast a haunting shadow that twisted its form into something monstrous. My breath left me, and I stumbled back, knocking into the couch. In that instant, the girl's cries turned into a furious shout. "Don't let it take you, Jake! Please!" The figure lunged at me from the darkness, and I swung the bat. It connected with a thud, but it barely flinched. Terror surged through me as I ran for the front door. I flung it open and bolted outside, the cold air slapping me in the face. But there was no safety outside. The shadows that had once retreated now pooled around the yard, swirling like a storm. The girl was still at the window, but in that moment, all I could hear was the growl of the thing behind me. That's when I saw it, a flicker of movement in the periphery, a figure emerging from the shadows, another one. My pulse raced, and I felt dread settle into my bones. This was only the beginning, and I was far from safe. I sprinted into the night, feet pounding against the gravel as I darted past the looming trees. The shadow creature was behind me, its presence palpable, suffocating. The air felt electric, crackling with danger, urging me to move faster, to escape whatever lurked in the dark. I didn't stop to question how I had ended up here or why I had wandered into trouble. All I could focus on was the instinct to survive. The locket hung heavily around my neck, though it felt more like a noose than a treasure. The whispers had become a cacophony, pressing in on me, begging to be heard. "Jake," they taunted. Yet one voice stood out from the others, the girl's. "Please, help me." With every step, the forest felt both strangely familiar and profoundly menacing, like a labyrinth where danger waited at every bend. I scanned the shadows flitting between the trees, expecting the night to swallow me whole at any moment. I couldn't shake the feeling that it wanted something from me, something darker than anyone could understand. Then I heard the whispers again. This time, they weren't just words, they were urging me toward the woods. I stumbled to a stop, hesitating, as every instinct told me to turn back to my house. But somehow, my feet began to move toward the clearing ahead. Something was pulling me in, an invisible thread binding me to the life, or the fate, that awaited me beneath the trees. Rushing deeper into the woods, I came to a wider area bathed in moonlight. Shadows danced across the ground, and suddenly, everything went eerily silent. Not even the wind dared to rustle the branches. The sense of danger became suffocating, and I felt the weight of unseen eyes locked on me. "No," I muttered, backing away instinctively. But there was nowhere to go. The trees loomed high above, their trunks twisting like gnarled fingers reaching for the sky. While I strained to catch my breath, I glimpsed something in the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement. There it was again, the small figure of the girl. "Help me," she whispered again, her voice fragile on the night air. She stood just out of reach, her features still blurred by the shadows, but eyes bright with something akin to desperation. "Why? What do you want?" I called out, feeling a tug of fear clawing at my chest. "What are you?" "I want to escape." She took a hesitant step closer. "They're coming for you, too. You must do what I say." Before I could gather my thoughts, the shadows erupted from the trees. Tendrils of darkness lunged towards me, and I was paralyzed by their speed. "No!" I shouted, gripping the bat tightly as I swung at the nearest shadow. But it passed right through me, taking another step forward with relentless intent. My heart raced as I felt the pull of the dark, urging me to join it, to succumb. But as the shadows inched closer, I thought of my family. I couldn't let this happen, couldn't allow whatever this was to take me. "Jake, trust me," the girl cried, her voice breaking through the panic that surrounded me. "Follow me." Against my better judgment, I sprinted toward her, adrenaline guiding my feet as I fought against the grip of shadowy tendrils. The darkness clawed at me, whispering my name, but I pushed through. I could feel her presence steadying me. "This way," she called, leading me toward a thicket of trees. With one last glance at the shadows threatening to engulf me, I followed the girl deeper into the woods. Thorns snagged at my clothes as we zigzagged through the underbrush. The whispers intensified behind me, but somehow the shadows seemed to hesitate at the tree line. Finally, we burst into a small clearing, illuminated by a soft light that felt like hope. The girl stopped beside an ancient tree, its gnarled roots sprawling outward. "We can hide here," she urged, looking back toward the creeping darkness. I dove beneath the twisted roots, rolling on the ground as I grimaced from the pain of the thorns tugging at my clothes. The girl followed, her form blurring as we shielded ourselves from the impending darkness. As we settled beneath the tree, I finally let out a shaky breath. "Thank you," I managed, still trembling. But as I turned to reassure her, she looked different, the shadow of something darker beginning to envelop her, too. Her eyes, once wide and desperate, now carried a haunting echo I'd seen before, a reflection of something lost. "Help me, Jake," she repeated, her voice shifting, echoing with the whispers that surrounded us. "You need to break the cycle. You can't let them take you, just like they took me." The reality of her words crashed down on me. This was no child in distress. She was lost, trapped within the shadows like so many before. Suddenly, whispers turned to screams outside our shelter. The shadows were advancing, reaching toward me with furious intensity. I felt frozen, caught between the girl who was not truly there and the shadows intent on calling me back to the dark. I gripped the pendant tightly, feeling its warmth against my palm. It was a warning, a reminder of everything that had happened, of people already lost, of those who may follow if I didn't fight back. The weight of what I had unearthed bore down on me, like a final plea. With a surge of determination, I felt the energy of the pendant igniting within me.
I rose from our hiding place, facing the shadows as they surged forward, ready to take their prize. "No!" I shouted, raising the locket high. They faltered, hesitating for just a moment, and in that moment I felt the presence of the girl urging me on, channeling every lost voice, every lost moment. "You can't take me! I won't be another one of your shadows!" As I shouted, I felt the ground shake, the roots beneath me trembling. The shadows writhed and hissed, their forms twisting and dissipating, retreated back into the darkness. It was enough, just a flicker of resistance, and they withdrew into the night. The clearing became still, yet a tension hung in the air. The girl's form flickered dangerously, the shadows still casting doubts in my mind. "You saved yourself, but will you look back for me?" she whispered, and I could hear the sorrow in her fading voice. "I wish I could," I breathed, feeling the locket grow cold in my grip. But as she dimmed, her presence grew lighter, as if a piece of her was released, freed from the grip of despair. But before she fully vanished, she spoke one last time. "Don't forget me, Jake." "I won't," I promised, though I didn't know if she could hear. As the first rays of dawn broke through the trees, I stumbled out of the clearing, breathless. I felt the shadows recede, leaving me standing alone. I looked back once, taking in the forest that had tried to claim me, and I wasn't sure if I had truly escaped, or if this was merely a temporary reprieve. I moved toward the road, determined to leave this place behind. But deep down, the whispers lingered, hinting at unfinished business. Whether they were supernatural phenomena or something else entirely, I couldn't say. But I knew one thing was for sure. This wasn't over. I had survived today, but the question of the lost still echoed in the depths of my mind. Could I truly leave them behind? Would I ever find a way to piece it all together? And as I drove away, I caught one last glimpse of the woods in my rearview mirror. They seemed to pulse with a life of their own, still watching, waiting. Perhaps some secrets were not meant to be unraveled.